So, have you ever caught a headline about some massive financial fraud and just thought to yourself, how on earth could anyone actually fall for that? I mean, recently this really heartbreaking story broke about a businesswoman who literally lost ownership of her condo to an alleged gold investment scam. And in the comment section of that news post, a user named Jimmy voiced this frustration that honestly so many of us share. He wrote, quote, "Sad, very sad. Smart people should know that such huge return investments are very likely a con job and too good to be true." And it is incredibly easy to look from the outside and just assume that only naive people get scammed. But actually, the reality of modern financial fraud, it's far more complex and frankly a lot more terrifying.
Which honestly brings us to the core mystery of this explainer. How exactly do these modern-day gold rushes trap incredibly smart, savvy investors? Because we're not talking about shadowy figures meeting in dark alleys here. We are talking about slick, polished corporate operations that wrap themselves in the language of legitimate finance, compliance, and retirement security. They don't just steal your money, they actually exploit the very legal systems that were designed to protect our life savings in the first place.
So, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are going to meticulously deconstruct one of the most stunning true crime financial frauds in recent memory, the anatomy of a gold IRA scam, specifically looking at the Regal Assets takedown. We're looking at the catastrophic rise and fall of a company that completely took advantage of the post-pandemic commodities rush. And by pulling from official court documents, press releases, and legal analyses, we're going to uncover exactly how this machine was built, how it operated day to day, and how it ultimately came crashing down.
Okay, let's dive right in with Section 1, the Golden Allura.
Every great magic trick requires a compelling distraction, right? Well, in the world of investment fraud, precious metals have pretty much always been the ultimate shiny object. When the economy gets shaky, people naturally look to gold for a sense of safety. The fraudsters know this, and they set their traps right where investors are looking for that security. Now, the blueprint for this specific operation was a company called Regal Assets, LLC, based out in Southern California. The masterminds running the show? CEO Tyler G. Gallagher and President Leah Donoso. For 3 whole years, between November 2019 and October 2022, they systematically targeted the retirement savings of over 120 customers across the entire country. This was absolutely not some small-time grift. This was a highly organized corporate machine aimed directly at tax-deferred retirement accounts, and they were wildly successful at convincing really smart, hardworking people to just hand over their futures.
Moving right along to Section 2, Anatomy of a Gold IRA.
To understand how Gallagher and Donoso actually pulled off this massive theft, we first need to understand the perfectly legal financial structure they exploited to do it. The scam worked so well because the underlying vehicle is a real, completely legitimate thing that thousands of people use every single day. These are the exact steps the investors thought they were taking. It's a pretty complex, jargon-heavy process, which is exactly why the fraud worked. First, the customer agrees to liquidate their traditional retirement account. Second, those funds get sent over to a new, third-party custodian who manages what's called a self-directed IRA. Third, that custodian transfers the money to Regal Assets. And fourth, and pay attention because this is the critical part, Regal was supposed to use that money to purchase gold and silver from a wholesaler and then have it shipped to a secure depository in the investor's name. I mean, it looks safe, right? There's a custodian, a depository, and very clear steps.
But here is the absolutely crucial detail. In order for an investor to keep the tax-deferred status of their retirement account, the IRS mandates that they literally cannot take physical possession of the gold. So no burying it in the backyard or keeping it in a safe in the basement. It must be held by a third-party depository. And this specific, completely legitimate legal requirement created a massive blind spot. The investors were legally forbidden from physically verifying their own assets, which meant Regal Assets could easily just claim the gold was safe in a vault somewhere, knowing full well the customer could never actually come looking for it.
All right, let's get into Section 3, the Regal Assets Ponzi.
Now, what's really fascinating here is the moment where that polished corporate pitch collided violently with grim reality. On one hand, you had the expectation. Investors completely believed their life savings were converted into tangible gold and silver, safely locked away in a depository under their name. But the reality? Over $21 million was completely diverted. Instead of buying metals, Regal Assets just used that money to fund their own business operations and personal expenses. The investors' money was just gone, literally vaporized the second it hit Regal's bank accounts.
And to put that into perspective, just look at the math from a snapshot taken in November 2021. At this specific point in time, Regal Assets owed its customers $7 million worth of precious metals that they had already paid for. But if you looked at Regal's actual bank accounts, they had less than $350,000 to their name. It is just a stark, undeniable visual of a company completely underwater. They were totally insolvent, and yet they just kept taking in new money.
Which leads us to the classic Ponzi pivot. To keep the lights on and stop earlier customers from complaining to the authorities, Regal had to scramble. When 5 new customers came in and invested $2.7 million, Regal didn't buy gold for those 5 people. Nope. They immediately took that new money and used it to finally purchase the metals owed to earlier complaining customers. According to the court documents, only one of those 5 new investors ever saw a single dime of their investment.
Which brings us to Section 4, Lies, Forgeries, and Excuses.
Look, when a company is missing $21 million, the executives have to work overtime to manage the rising panic from their investors. And this wasn't just some standard business failure where they went bankrupt and apologized. No, it was an active, aggressive cover-up. Regal Assets literally manufactured fake records, actively forging documents to conceal the missing millions. They had to fool not just the individual investors, but the IRA custodians, who were legally required to oversee the accounts. It was just a reckless campaign of fraudulent misrepresentations designed entirely to buy the executives a little more time.
And you know, the human element of this cover-up is truly chilling. When panicked customers realized their online accounts were sitting at zero and frantically emailed the company for answers, President Leah Donoso had this slick script ready to go. She would just casually reply, "It takes 3 days to show up." She developed this routine pattern of lying directly to the investors, constantly blaming the third-party depositories for administrative delays that simply did not exist.
And get a load of this next quote because it highlights the sheer audacity of the entire operation. In an email to a customer's attorney who was demanding answers, Leah Donoso actually wrote, quote, "The vault was told Friday to get everything keyed in. If I have to fly in person and stand in front of someone to see that this is done, I will." She completely masked outright theft with this performance of fake outrage and fierce dedication to the customer. It's honestly a masterclass in manipulation.
All right, let's wrap this up with Section 5, the $49 million reckoning. Eventually, the math always catches up with you. You can only rob Peter to pay Paul for so long before Peter calls the federal government. The bleeding was finally stopped when 2 major regulatory bodies joined forces. The Commodity Futures Trading Commission, the CFTC, and the California Department of Financial Protection and Innovation, the DFPI, teamed up to file a massive joint lawsuit in September 2023. What's absolutely vital to note here is that this joint action reflects a much broader trend. Agencies are really uniting against commodities fraud, which has basically become a modern-day gold rush. In fact, regulators actually had to file a very similar civil action against another dealer, Red Rock Secured, earlier that exact same year.
And man, the hammer came down hard. In October 2024, U.S. District Judge Fernando M. Olgan ordered a default judgment against Regal Assets, Tyler Gallagher, and Leah Donoso. The total price tag for their fraud, an absolutely staggering $49 million.
Let's break down exactly what that absolute financial and professional destruction looks like. The defendants are jointly and severally liable, meaning they are all on the hook for the whole shebang. That includes over $21.9 million in restitution going directly back to the defrauded victims and over $27.3 million in civil monetary penalties. On top of that, they face a permanent injunction against violating the Commodity Exchange Act and California law and a permanent ban from ever trading in any CFTC-regulated markets again. Their careers in finance are permanently, entirely over.
So what does this all mean for us? How do we actually apply this information to protect our own hard-earned money? Well, the CFTC gives us some pretty clear guidance on this. First, before committing a single dollar, you must verify a company's registration using the NFA Basic system online. Second, be incredibly wary of handing over retirement funds to any unregistered company. Just don't do it. And third, if you see something suspicious, report it to the CFTC whistleblower office. Not only does it stop fraud in its tracks, but whistleblowers can actually be eligible to receive between 10 and 30% of the collected monetary sanctions. Verifying this information literally takes 5 minutes, but it can absolutely save a lifetime of savings.
Which leaves us with one final, absolutely critical thought to reflect on today. How secure is the vehicle holding your retirement savings, and are you verifying before you trust? The victims of Regal Assets, they weren't foolish. They just trusted a system that was perfectly designed to exploit a legal blind spot. True financial security doesn't just come from choosing the right asset. It comes from fiercely verifying the people who hold it. Stay vigilant, stay educated, and always, always verify.